Carlos stood naked on the airport runway of a South Pacific atoll with the only things that mattered: his lover, Adrienne, the semi-automatic rifle that was keeping them alive, the 5 kneeling misters who were dangerous even in captivity, and 3 ways out of 4, his very last decision. That 4th option would be the hardest of all. Those are the first 2 sentences in my new novel, Clarity, about what's coming after AI and what's going to be on the other side of the singularity. What's really weird about those first 2 sentences is that they're the last 2 that I wrote. You want to come along on a weird voyage? Well, this book is one, and my writing process is another. The second hardest thing about writing is the first draft. And that may sound weird, but it really is. Because you just have to get through it. And when I write the first draft, that's my thing. I just get through it. I don't do any editing. When I hit a spot in the story where, I have to go back and foreshadow this, or I have to go back and introduce this character, or this seems inconsistent, or whatever, I don't stop and go back and edit. I don't stop and go back and research. I keep writing, and I leave a little set of square brackets. I call them alarms. And I put a note inside those square brackets, and I just keep writing. And when the first draft is done, I know a couple of things about it, 2 things at least. 1, it's not going to be perfect. And 2, it's not even going to be right. But it's a thing. It exists. And because it exists, now I can work on it as a thing. Once I'm done with that first draft, with 15, 20, 40, whatever it is, alarms written in it, then I go back and read it front to back. And I look at the alarms, and I start to get a sense for how to deal with them. I didn't really have much of a sense of how to deal with them when I was writing. I was just aware that they existed. So now, reading that first draft, I get a sense for it. And I get a sense for a couple other things, too. I get a sense for really where this story fits into my genre, which I didn't have that before. And I get a sense of my audience, which I also didn't have before. Between those 2 things, now I can start cutting out things that don't fit with my newly intended audience. I can start elaborating on things. And that's when I go through and I do my first rewrite. And the first thing I do in that rewrite is, yes, I cut out things that don't fit. I don't add too much unless there's an alarm for it. I go through the whole text. I just search for square brackets. And when I find a set of square brackets, like, okay, this. Now I have to go back. I back up. I read the entire chapter, maybe the chapter before, with that one single set of square brackets in mind, that one alarm. And I deal with that alarm. In the case of one character who I wrote the most elaborate combat scene. I mean, it's 2 sides, and one vastly out-techs the other. This battle's going to be over in seconds, and it was. But the loss of several characters in that fight was devastating to my characters, to a lot of my other secondary characters. And so I had to take this one minor character that everybody focused on and introduce them, because I had introduced this person as they headed off to the battlefield. So now I had to go back and create this character in keeping with the community's response to their loss, and make them into somebody that the reader would care about. I already cared him. I torn my heart out killing this person and doing these things to them, because as I was writing it, I realized what they meant to the community. But all I could do when I was writing it at the end was put in a set of square brackets that says, introduce this character, give them several scenes. And then I had to go back and do that. I almost forgot. If you've gotten this far through my very first video, give it a like. And if you'd like to see more stuff on how I deal with my neurodiversity or the perspectives that gives me on things, consider subscribing. Thanks. Oh, and I'll include a link to my novel in the description. That gets you through the first rewrite. Now I go back and I read the second draft. And very often, as I'm reading, I'm putting new alarms in because things don't line up. The timing is wrong, the feel is wrong, whatever it is. So I go back and I read my second draft. It's my first new version. And I check it for the audience. Make sure that it's in keeping with the audience that I have in mind now. Make sure that there's nothing that might have seeped in from another genre that might alienate readers or land this story in a genre I don't want to be in. So I check, did the first revision work? What could work better? While I'm reading it, I do very little editing. I leave myself new alarms. Empty alarms are fine. It's like, I have questions about this. I don't know what those questions are yet. I just leave myself an empty set of square brackets, an empty alarm, and I go on with it. Then I read this new version. I read it again, I rewrite it, and I edit it. This is where I start thinking about flow and timing. How does the text work at an emotional level, not just a technical one? And I know I've already talked about the emotional level for the death of a particular character. And getting that right set a tone for that period in the book that guided the rest of my writing. Writing before and after that scene was informed by that moment. Then what do? Well, I'm only on my third draft. I think Clarity had more than 24. Now, at times you just go through scattershot, you pick it up, you read a chapter somewhere, you go, oh, what about this? You go back, you do your counter research, you fill in your spreadsheet, you check it against your reference document, because I keep a spreadsheet with all my characters, their descriptions, some basic characteristics about them, and a timeline so that I know when things are happening. The timeline in the chapter titles was one of the later things I added to it. It's like the flow of time here really shifts. 3 years go by in a chapter. 2 years go by in a chapter. 3 chapters take up 3 days. 3 pages take up 10 seconds. So it was very important to me to keep a guide sheet so that I knew when things were happening. And when I was rereading chapter 12 and then, I need to check on chapter 5, and bouncing around in time, even worse than the normal storytelling time dilation, it really helped to keep that guide. During this repeat process, that took 3 years. I believed in my story. My wife loved the characters, and that kept me going. My first draft took 3 months and 60,000 words. Then when I saw what I had, like I said, I found my audience, I found my subgenre, I found that I needed to research my character names. Now that I knew who these people were in detail, then I could go out and find appropriate names for them. First draft, I picked names out of the air. I just threw names down, and they were boring names, but they were enough. And I had my guide sheet, so I knew who was who and what was what. So I researched the characters' names and did a major rewrite. Again, over the next 3 years, like I said, I revisited it several times. The word count grew from 60,000 to 105,000, then fell to about 102, and it just oscillated around that 101, 103,000 word count. After about a quadrillion revisions, almost nothing was changing. It's that scary time, really scary, when you think it's ready. And I was looking over it, and I was thinking maybe this is time. And I found a YouTube channel from a developmental editor named BookFox. And I started making improvements that I hadn't known I needed. I bought a program to serve as a line editor and found 8 errors on the first page. An average of 5 errors per page gave me 1,800 minor fixes. That was astonishing. I'm serious about my punctuation. I'm serious about my sentence structure. I'm serious about getting things right. And I made 5 errors per page that I didn't catch in a dozen back-to-back readings. Because I was too close to it. I was too used to it. I was too used to the pacing in my head. Yeah. Some of the changes it suggested, I rejected. Maybe half of them. Because they were intentional, or they were things that the characters said, or words that it just didn't know because I'm writing speculative science fiction. So a lot of misspellings were left in to illustrate how the character pronounces things. Through all of this, I came to understand just how important the opening is. And I wrote a new first chapter, and I asked some of my friends, I said, if a book started with this, would you keep reading? And a couple of them said, yeah, this is really intriguing. And I know these people, they're very intellectual. And then my emotional friends with their more experiential way of reading said no, and they really hated it. So I did some rework on it and realized I wasn't going to be able to get it there. It was still a good chapter. But it couldn't be first. So now, here I am, 15 versions in, and I've written a new first chapter, and it's not a good first chapter, so now I need another first, and my original first chapter is now third. And in a lot of cases, what a lot of writers will do is they'll say, okay, fine, I'm just going to cut out all this stuff that builds up, and I'm going to cut right to this. And I thought about that, and I thought that the intro, the world building that was in there was too important. So I took the climax, and I lifted it out, put it at the beginning of the story, reworded it, so there was enough there to understand what was going on and how much was at stake. Without really giving anything away. I thought I had it. It's like, okay, this is great. I was ready. I hired a cover artist. I uploaded files. I set a release date. And that first paragraph kept nagging at me. I wasn't satisfied. And I watched another video on just the first sentence. And got some great examples of wonderful first sentences. And it's like, I can't exactly do any of those, but I can take a couple of these and kind of mash them together and do this. And that's how those first 2 sentences came to be the last 2 sentences that I wrote. And that brings me to the hardest single part of finishing a novel: letting it go. I knew that it was good. I knew that it was about as good as it was ever going to get. And I also knew that I could make little revisions and little improvements for the rest of time. And then I would have a perfect novel that was never actually finished, never went out. And that's why I set a release date, so that I couldn't keep editing it beyond a certain point. There was a point where it had to be done. And it was awesome, and it was wonderful, and it was terrifying, and it was fantastic. Harlan Ellison and maybe a couple of other writers say, never edit, never rewrite. Okay, fine. Maybe that works for them. But most writers go through a process that's something like the process that I went through writing Clarity. And I don't think that my own autistic ADHD personality and process is that different from a lot of writers. I think we all do very similar things. Now, my setting alarms, I think, is unusual. I don't think it's unique, but it really helps me. What I can tell you is that I spent 3.5 years writing this, and everything that I went through to do it just makes me prouder of it. So I hope you found this interesting, and I hope you find this interesting.